and you're in there too fast, and so it throws me off a little bit. So da-da 1, 2, da-da 3.
I guess depending how fast we're going. I thought we were going fast.
No, it just whatever tempo we're taking, it's still however fast the beat goes. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum.
Right.
Yeah. But you were limping in at a different time. So
Actually, I think I sped it up because if you go faster, obviously.
well, we want to go pretty. We don't want to go too slow. Da dee 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 da da dum da da dum da da dum da da dum.
It did it.
No, my dears, you didn't. You didn't. You were sneaking in there a little faster. Yeah.
Like we both are. We both are, aren't we?
See if it wants to go yet. We'll see. Yeah. Well, it's that morning of the time change, so. You ready, Todd?
Yeah. You ready? We're good.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah yeah, whoa yeah 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 yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. I want to begin, as always, by welcoming all that you bring with you to this place, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. And as always, this includes those who hear me say this every Sunday, as well as those who might be joining us for the first time today. You're equally as welcome. And of course, it includes those who are streaming with us this morning. It's also great to know that you're here. So welcome to one and all. Before we take a few moments to greet one another, I do want to make a couple of announcements. One, to let you know that next Friday, our Social Justice Coordinating Council, along with our UUs for Justice in the Middle East, will be sponsoring our first in a series of meaningful movies. So that's going to be next Friday at 7. And they're going to begin with Imprisoning a Generation, which is about growing up as children in Gaza. So if you're interested, please be here for that next Friday at 7. Then I also wanted to let you know that church member Dick Cleveland's celebration of life, he died a few months ago. is going to be taking place next Saturday at 3 p.m., and that will actually be at the Rockwood Retirement Community in the Summit. That's again next Saturday, the 16th at 3. I will be presiding over that service and would invite anyone who knew Dick or would like to attend. So let's take a few moments, as always, to greet one another, to say hi to those that we enjoy seeing and look forward to seeing each Sunday. I also hope that you will say hi to somebody you haven't met yet. And if you are joining us for the first time, we have one rule here, and that is you cannot be shy. Please. All right, as always, there's going to be more opportunity to visit with one another during our social hour, so I invite you all to stay for that. But we are going to move forward now with our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
Our opening reflection this morning comes from Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy and your passion. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction. Bring your need for healing and your powers to heal. There is work to do, and you have all that you need to do it right here in this room.
And with those wonderful words, please stand in body or spirit to sing number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
Like to invite our young and our young at heart forward for a little story together. Come on forward. Well, while you're coming forward, I will say that the story I'd like to share with you this morning was adapted by the Reverend Alice Anacheka Naisman and Alyssa Davy Piermain. And it was written by Malba Tahan, who was a mathematician from Brazil. And it begins the way most stories do. Once upon a time, two friends named Musa and Negib made a journey through the mountains of Persia on camelback. They came after a time to a place where a great stream flowed by a sandy bank and big trees gave it shade. There, they had a discussion, which turned into an argument. Negib grew angry and did something unthinkable. He slapped his friend Musa across the face. Musa was stunned. He felt angry. He wanted to slap Negib back, but then he thought, I cannot be too mad at my friend because I could have done the same thing. We are alike, and I care about him, and I don't want to fight with him anymore. So he walked over to the trees instead and picked up a stick. With the stick, he wrote in the sand, "Today, my best friend slapped me." Then he and his friend stood in silence and watched as the desert wind blew the words in the sand away. By the time the writing had disappeared, Negib had said that he was sorry. The friends got back on their camels and rode to their destination in a distant city. On their trip back through the mountains, they stopped again at the same river. This time, the two friends decided to take a swim. Since their first visit, the rains had made the current stronger and the river much deeper. Musa, the friend who had been slapped, stepped into the water first, and right away he slipped on a rock and was dragged under by the current, and he began to drown. Negib jumped in without a second thought and pulled his friend to safety. The two friends sat again in silence for a time, until Musa had regained his breath. Then he rose and went to his saddlebags. There he found a carving knife. This time he went to a rock near the river. Into the rock he carved the words, "Today my best friend saved me." Again the two friends sat in silence. Finally, Negib spoke. "My friend, after I hurt you, you wrote these words in sand. Now, after I saved you, you wrote the words in stone. Why?" Musa replied, "When someone hurts us, we should write it down in sand where the winds of forgiveness can erase it away. This way, our hearts are free from bitterness and we can renew our friendships. But when someone does something kind for us, we should engrave it in stone and in our hearts so that we will never forget." "Thank you, my friend," said Negib. "I'm very grateful for our friendship. I don't ever want to hurt you again." The two friends embraced and continued on their journey together. But that is where our story ends. And now Raylan is going to help me light the second chalice.
We light this second chalice so that as our children and youth go to their chapels, they carry the light of our flame with them. May it illuminate, inspire, and warm you as it does us. We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
Thank you, Michelina. We'll now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. I want to begin with a candle for church member Torgy Lorentzen, whose brother Jim Moore passed away this week. Some of you may remember Jim from years ago when he was a member here. And also for Hugh and Jody Sievers, Hugh's father, retired Brigadier General Ronald Sievers, also a retired vascular surgeon, passed away just yesterday. I understand that they have probably already gone to Florida to be with family, but will probably be streaming with us this morning. So Hugh and Jody will be thinking of you guys and your family at this time. Let's take a moment on behalf of others that you might be thinking of. And as always, you're welcome to name them aloud if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion.
As we move into meditation this morning, I invite you to find a comfortable posture and close your eyes if you'd like. The words to lead us into meditation are from Robert R. Walsh. When the great plates slip, and the earth shivers, and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidarity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that is often torn, but always healing. There is your strength.
For my reading today, I'm going to read from the Tao Te Ching, from the translation that I prefer to use by Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell is a translator of ancient languages, and I'd highly recommend some of his other writings. Many years ago, when Bill Moyers was doing a PBS special on Genesis, he'd asked Stephen Mitchell to give him a translation, which Mitchell was not very happy about. It wasn't exciting to him. But he finally started looking at Genesis and found a lot of wisdom in it. And so he has a wonderful translation, but also an interpretation, which is what makes Mitchell great. And one of my favorite books ever on the historical Jesus is his translation of the gospel story, and specifically his introduction in The Gospel According to Jesus, translated by Stephen Mitchell. And Mitchell really sees the historical Jesus as a person who was shaped by his own suffering and the deep oppression that he experienced as an individual, both being a Jewish person in a world dominated by Rome, but also being a fatherless child in a Jewish community that their whole belief in God was in a father. And so those who were fatherless were discriminated against, did not have the same rights, the same opportunities, were considered untouchables. And Mitchell really makes a great argument for saying the pain of that is what carried in throughout his ministry and the epiphany, right, that I am a son of God and I am a son of man, or a human being. And everybody is a child of God and therefore a human being, and we have to treat everyone like a human being. It's really profound stuff that Stephen Mitchell comes up with. And so I would really recommend it. And several years ago, I went to a Jesus seminar, which probably some of you are familiar with the Jesus seminars. The older folks amongst us, the Jesus seminar was a group. I think it started back in the 80s. That was about 200 scholars initially. They've since changed, but these scholars from all over the world, biblical scholars, would get together and try to decipher who the historical Jesus might have been, at least of what was written about him and said about him might be true. And they generally agreed that about maybe 14% of what is said or written about Jesus may have happened. But anyway, they made quite a stir going around the country, several of these scholars, and I got to attend one in Cincinnati several years ago. And during the question-answer period, after they'd given their real sort of scholarly interpretation of the historical Jesus, I asked what they thought of Stephen Mitchell's interpretation. And there were two Jesus seminar fellows, and one said, "Yeah, I never heard of him." And the other fellow said, yeah, Stephen Mitchell's a friend of mine. And he goes, the remarkable thing is hundreds of scholars got together for years. We worked on this and tried to figure out who the historical Jesus is. And Stephen Mitchell, who's a mystic, just sort of did it very intuitively on his own, and we came up with the same Jesus. So it shows you a little bit about Stephen Mitchell, and I'm going to, I think Jesus is one of the great limpers of human history, and so it fits well into my sermon that I'll have, my second sermon that I'll have in a couple of minutes. So after all of that, here is the reading that I chose from the Tao Te Ching. I should also say, one of the things I really like about Mitchell's translations is they're not pure translations in the sense that they are an exact translation of the words used. They are much more impressionistic in that it is how can I feel today what somebody who would have heard this thousands of years ago would have felt. How can we have that same experience? So this is what I love about his translation. So, without further ado, fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Thank you so much, John and Michelina. That's just magnificent. When I was 9 years old, I stepped on a toothpick, which eventually led to blood poisoning and surgery to have it removed. The operation left an open hole shaped like a funnel running all the way through my right foot from top to bottom. Yeah, I know. As an open wound, it required daily care and medication to prevent it from becoming infected, a task that my mother took care of, plus routinely soaking my foot in Epsom's salt, the miracle drug of my childhood. And I found looking at it so horrifying that I just refused to do so until it finally began to close over, filling with the scar tissue that remains to this day, ironically in the shape of an open eye that's now always looking up at me. Once I began to walk on it again, the doctors advised my mother, well, just turn him loose. He's a kid. He'll figure it out on his own. What they didn't consider was that I'd have to start by walking on the outside of my foot, which caused my shoe to wear on one side, preventing me from walking flat-footed even when I was able to do so again. And to this day, my right shoe wears on the outside, and people occasionally ask, why are you limping? Or what'd you do to your foot? And after many years, I quickly learned to explain it's just an old injury that sometimes acts up when I'm fatigued. And though I never notice when it's happening, I have wondered if this also helps explain why my right knee has issues preventing me from running anymore, and the lower pain I have on the right side, or the pain, I should say, I have on the right side of my lower back ever since I was a teenager. And the reason that I walk so much damn slower than most people. I often joke that I don't walk, I mosey. And anyone who's ever gone for a hike or snowshoed or just for a walk with me knows what I mean. Whenever Peggy and I walk, she inevitably ends up several feet ahead of me, then stops and waits for me to catch up. A few weeks ago, while we were at the airport, I walked on the moving sidewalk and she walked beside it, enabling us both to keep perfect pace with each other. First time in 30 years of marriage. And outside of being a little embarrassed and sometimes frustrated when I can't keep up with others, and the minor pain that I sometimes have in my back and knee, I've learned to consider this an important part of who I am, and a very special wound I share in common with an elite group of mythological figures, and a reflection of how I live, walking a little out of step than most people, moving slowly so that I don't miss anything, with a scar that reminds me, no matter the ways in which I've suffered or have been wounded, or how grotesque and horrifying as life can sometimes be, things are always looking up. They're just gonna one of these is just ban me from telling jokes. So this is the reason that I relate to the story of Oedipus, whose name means, you know what Oedipus means? Club-footed. Yeah. Although I'm one of the few people I know who has great admiration for Sigmund Freud and maintains much appreciation for his pioneering work and accomplishments, I do disagree with his familiar interpretation of this myth, resulting in his theory of the Oedipus complex, this complex which became central to his psychosexual theory of the human psyche, and to the notion that the human unconscious is libidinous, is supposedly expressed through a child's unconscious sexual desire for the opposite sex parent and animosity toward the same-sex parent. I'm not going to go into the reasons, many reasons I don't believe in an Oedipus complex, but do want to explain that I think Freud's interpretation of this myth is just unfounded. It was as early as 1909, psychologist Carl Jung once said, "I realized that I could not treat latent psychoses if I did not understand their symbolism. It was then I began to study mythology." And it's precisely because I agree that human myths reflect humanity's collective unconscious that I must disagree with Freud's anomalous interpretation of Oedipus. You see, myths share common themes and archetypes across cultures, across geography, across time. The story of Oedipus accidentally murdering his father and unwittingly marrying his mother, are merely the particular variations of what is a more universal mythological theme, that of a father's fear of his children becoming independent of his control, or more simply, of a patriarch losing his power. This fear may have been reasonable in early human history, when, like other apes, our species lived in small family-sized troops dominated by a powerful, protective, domineering male. This isn't to say that all such patriarchs were even unloving or uncaring, only that as they grew old and weakened, a younger male was destined to challenge and usurp their authority, maybe even forcing them to leave, which spelled certain death without the group's protection. Myths expressing this fear are particularly typical of Greek mythology, from which the Oedipus account also belongs. The Greek god Uranus, for example, I'm not going to make any jokes about that. The Greek god Uranus, for example, is said to have fathered the first group of beings, a race of giants called Titans. Afraid that they might one day grow to overcome him, immediately upon the birth of his 12 children, Uranus imprisons them in Tartarus, the deepest part of the ocean. So he's reflective of a father who crushes his children by preventing them from growing up, making their own decisions, or having their own ideas and values. One of his sons, however, Cronus, does emerge from the oppressive weight of his father's authoritarian behavior, and just as Uranus feared, castrates him, makes him impotent. Following in his father's footsteps, Cronus decides to swallow his children as they're being born. Swallowing another person symbolizes the ultimate form of sadism, through which one overcomes having to choose between freedom and belonging by completely dominating others, taking their individual will and identity into oneself. Before long, one of his kids, Zeus, escapes his father's control, defeats him, and has Cronus cast into Tartarus. Then, following in the family tradition, Zeus, after a warning from his impotent grandfather, swallows his wife Metis whole while she is still pregnant in an attempt to prevent his unborn child from eventually usurping his throne. As unsavory as these myths are, they share a common theme, right? The patriarchal fear of being rendered powerless by subsequent generations. This, I would argue, is also what the Oedipus myth is really about. Most of us, I presume, are unfamiliar with the story of Oedipus, though we know the name because of the complex that Freud famously associated with it. In the myth, Oedipus's father, King Laius, is warned by an oracle that one day his child would grow up to kill him. So he has the infant prince, taken to the mountains, his foot nailed to the floor of the forest, left to be devoured by animals. Yeah, these were not children's fairy tales by any means. Fortunately, the infant is discovered and rescued by a kindly shepherd who carries him to Corinth, where he ends up being adopted by its king, King Polybus, who raises him as his own child and names him after his wound, Oedipus, the club-footed. When a young adult, Oedipus learns of the oracle's prediction that he's destined to kill his father. But because he dearly loves his father, who he believes is King Polybus, he leaves Corinth to prevent it from ever coming true. Along the road, he encounters a very rude man on horseback who attempts to strike Oedipus with his staff. Oedipus grabs the staff, or simply ducks, according to some versions of the story, accidentally causing the man to fall off the horse and die. The man, as you might have guessed, was King Laius, his biological father. Unaware of this, Oedipus continues his journey, getting as far away from Corinth as possible to protect his adoptive parents. Moving along, he is confronted by a monster that has been terrifying the region. It has the bust of a woman, the body of a lion, and the wings of a bird. Maybe you've recognized this figure. If he wishes to survive the encounter, he must correctly answer the beast riddle. Name the animal that has 4 feet in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. Oedipus thinks for a bit, then responds. Human beings crawl on all 4s when they are infants, walk upright on 2 legs when they are mature, and require a 3rd leg, a staff, when they are old. Having correctly answered the mystery of the Sphinx, the creature is vanquished, and Oedipus, unbeknownst to him, wins the right to marry the recently widowed queen, who it turns out is his mother. And when they realize what's happened, it's part of the story you probably don't know, the queen is so distraught she kills herself, and Oedipus plucks out his own eyes before disappearing from the face of the earth. Now, I don't know about you, but this doesn't sound much to me like the story of a boy who secretly wishes to murder his father and marry his mother. I think Freud might have stretched it. Yeah. Rather, like the other common Greek myths I've mentioned, it seems to be about the patriarchal fear of growing old, becoming powerless, of one's inevitable death, which doesn't require an oracle to predict. Indeed, it is King Laius' misuse of his staff, his 3rd leg, according to the riddle of the Sphinx, representing his old age, that leads to his death, literally to his downfall. And it was similar with Uranus, who again tries to suppress his children beneath the weight of the world, yet is inevitably defeated by Chronos, right? Chronos, time, as in chronology. And that's really what these myths are about, the fear of losing power, of the inevitable change that must come with subsequent generations, with the passage of time. They reflect the paranoia and suspiciousness typical of authoritarian regimes, of their oppressive and cruel policies, and, sadly, of the very same tendencies eventually manifesting in others who rise to power. They also depict the suffering and cruelty that young people do face, both as children, raised by parents who overpower, sometimes well-meaning parents, right, who overpower them by crushing their spirits and controlling their wills, as well as by entire societies that use them as cannon fodder while they are still so young they have to be called the infantry. This, I think, is where the Oedipus story is unique, in its emphasis upon the innocent intentions of Oedipus, and that he goes through life permanently injured because of his father's paranoia and cruelty. As a club-footed man, Oedipus merges with another type of common myth, stories involving people whose feet have been pierced or who walk with a limp. Jesus is such a figure, as one whose feet retain the scars of his crucifixion even after his resurrection, even after he moves beyond it. Jacob is another who, upon wrestling with God, walks with a limp for the rest of his life. The name of the Greek god, Hephaestus, means god of the crooked foot. Because of an injury, some versions say he got while he was trying to break up a fight between his parents, Zeus and Hera. Scamander is another Greek god whose name means limping man, which sounds a bit like how I walk. I scamander along. And actually, the word meander does come from the name of a very especially winding river that the Greeks named Meandrus, just as Scamander is derived from their Scamandarin River. A meanderer or a scamanderer is one who moves about like a river in an indirect, slow, awkward manner. And let's not leave out the story of Achilles' heel. Fearing that her child might die young, Achilles' mother takes her infant son by the heel while dipping him into a magical river that will make him invulnerable. And since his heel never gets immersed, he grows up with a weak foot, which eventually leads to his death after it's struck with a poisonous arrow. Of all of these, I still relate most with the story of Oedipus, because I too grew up with a paranoid, authoritarian father. It was, in fact, his discarded toothpick that pierced my foot. So I'm a bit of a real-life Oedipus. And this isn't so just because I have a scarred foot, lower back pain, and walk slower than most. It's because I know what it is to be nailed to the forest floor, to be crushed beneath the weight of brutality, to have my will swallowed by another person, to feel stuck like Jesus, to want to stop the violence against my battered mother like Hephaestus, to wrestle with the problem of God in the midst of suffering like Jacob, to feel awkward and slow like Scamander, and to have weaknesses like Achilles. But none of this truly makes me weak. It actually makes me stronger. It makes me resilient. It gives me grit. All of us have suffered and been wounded in life. And I'm guessing can relate to these club-footed limpers in our own way. Of course, few of us are so masochistic as to enjoy suffering, but we should come to realize that it goes along with living. And the more of it we experience, the more resilient and stronger we become. This is the whole point of tormenting ourselves with exercise. Right? I call my workout room my torture chamber. By breaking our bodies down, we paradoxically build them up. By running until we're exhausted, we become able to run faster and longer. By exposing ourselves to disease, to dis-ease, and allergens, we become immune to them. Still, there are some who wish to avoid pain at all cost. And these, ironically, are those who become the oppressors of others, which nowadays is increasingly manifested by using cultural pressures to control the freedoms of expression, especially when it comes to speech. They justify this by claiming that some speech is harmful to others, therefore should not be protected. In The Coddling of the American Mind, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff say equating speech to violence is a form of concept creep, meaning that the terms involved, both speech and violence in this case, have been expanded beyond their normal definitions, which ironically justifies real violence, by definition, against those deemed to say harmful things. As a Berkeley op-ed claimed recently, physically violent actions if used to shut down speech that is deemed hateful, are not acts of violence, but rather acts of self-defense. You know how they used to defend themselves against such violence? They burned them as witches and heretics for saying dangerous things, harmful things. And I wonder if this is partly because we're living in an age of social media in which data drivers are constantly asking us to indicate what we like and dislike. Thumbs up, thumbs down. This reinforces the idea that we as individuals, that our likes and dislikes should matter to everyone, not just ourselves. I personally worry about my likes and dislikes, not yours. And that's just, right? I'm responsible for myself. It was one of my favorite Ally McBeal episodes. Did you remember Ally McBeal's? Ally McBeal was complaining, about all the stuff going on in her life, and her friend Georgia, so-called friend, said, "Ally, why are your problems always more important than everyone else's?" And Ally looked at her like, "Are you kidding me? Because they're my problems." For her, that's the way it should be, but not everybody else has to be worried about Ally McBeal's problems or my problems. That was a little divergence there. Yes, it also prohibits the opportunity for genuine dialogue that can lead to new insights and maybe even us changing our mind, changing our like or dislike, right? And it falsely reduces subjects to simple binary truths like or dislike, resulting in more extremist attitudes in general. Again, as Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff say, social media has channeled partisan passions into the creation of a call-out culture. Anyone can be publicly shamed for saying something well-intentioned that someone else interprets uncharitably. News media platforms and outlets allow citizens to retreat into self-confirmatory bubbles, where their worst fears about the evils of the other side come to be confirmed and amplified by extremists and trolls intent on sowing discord and division. But I mostly think the current inability to tolerate hearing ideas we disagree with, the desire to be warned before hearing something that might set us off, stems from a weakness of character, an inability to suffer anything that we dislike if we could. Rather than taking the Oedipus path, which is slow and winding and sometimes difficult, some prefer the easy path of King Laius up on his high horse, from which he uses his staff as a weapon, the very thing that's supposed to hold him steady in his old age, representing the wisdom that he should have gained by traversing that slow and winding path for a very long time. Nothing I know of makes this point better than an excerpt from a recent commencement speech by Chief Justice John Roberts in 2017. I probably should have given you a trigger warning before mentioning that name. This was a commencement speech he gave when his grandson graduated from middle school. And if as a liberal, the mention of Robert's name, a Bush appointee, does cause some unease, just think about the few but important times that his vote has landed on our side. like when his swing vote protected Obamacare and made gay marriage legal. Or just remember that people we disagree with are not demons, and maybe they have something to offer. Now, the commencement speakers will typically also wish you good luck and extend good wishes to you, Roberts told the elite group of ninth graders at Cardigan Mountain School. I will not do that, and I'll tell you why. From time to time in the years to come, I hope you will be treated unfairly, and that you will come to know the value of justice. I hope that you will suffer betrayal, because that will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time, so that you don't take your friends for granted. I wish you bad luck, again from time to time, so that you will be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved, and that the failure of others is not completely deserved either. And when you lose, and you will from time to time, I hope every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It is a way for you to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you'll be ignored, so you know the importance of listening to others. And I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Whether I wish these things or not, they're going to happen. And whether you benefit from them or not will depend upon your ability to see the message in your misfortunes. In his best-selling book, Anti-Fragile, Nassim Nicholas Taleb distinguishes between three states. First is fragility, like a china teacup that breaks, is shattered, and can never be repaired. Second is resilience, like a shock absorber that can withstand trauma without being harmed or stressed at all. But some things benefit from shocks, he says. They thrive and grow when exposed to volatility, disorder, and stressors, and love adventure, risk, and uncertainty. Yet in spite of the ubiquity of the phenomenon, there is no word for the exact opposite of fragile. Let's call it anti-fragile. Anti-fragile, I think, is the ability that Roberts is getting at, and why the story of Oedipus and those like it, what they're really about. Our ability to experience trauma, shock, disorder, hurt, discomfort, and uncertainty, and still move forward with our lives, even stronger and better than we were, even if our negative experiences do show up in ways that make us look and move awkwardly through life, through our scars. The Stoic Epictetus was also born with a bad leg, another limper that caused him to limp for his entire life. And like all Stoics, he practiced anti-fragility by regularly visualizing what it would be like to lose his most valued possessions, his reputation, his loved ones, even his own life, in order to better appreciate all that he had. And actually practice discomfort by sometimes going hungry, being cold, sleeping on a hard floor, and so on, just to know that he could live a happy life in difficult times. Along with self-denial, not gratifying every desire to know that he can survive in a world that doesn't always meet his expectations. But the Oedipus path is not about intentionally seeking hardships, but only realizing, as Robert said, it doesn't matter whether we wish them or not, they are going to happen. And knowing that we can not only survive them, but because of them we can thrive. Thank you.
Please rise and body your spirit to sing number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Our closing words this morning are from Richard Gilbert. It is easy to feel religious impulses well up inside us when inspiration lives at our elbow and walks on our path. It is hard to feel religious when we are tired, with work to be done, and discouragement seems to mark our every move. O God of order and neatness, we give thanks for all that is good. We are grateful for manifold blessings bestowed upon us. O God of chaos and disorder, be with us also when life is messy. Bless our coming in and our going out from this day forth. Amen. Blessed be. Assalamu alaikum and shalom.